All right, so in the last section, we read a couple of things. So we have this section here is just introducing our characters. We talk about Robert, his dad, and 115 other people who are starting the colony away from England and in the United States. They settled in Virginia, which is right here. They actually settled on an island off of Virginia. And this was considered the New World, even though they were still on the same planet. And we know that there are animals that they've never seen before, like the buffalo, beaver, grizzly bear, salmon. And this was a really great place for them because, as you know from yesterday's work, they were given 150 acres each, which is a lot more than they had, and it wasn't as dirty and crowded and filthy as it was in England. But what they didn't realize was there was 7,000 Native American people living there. The two closest happened to be the Algonquin, which those people were living on the island that they settled. And then just off of that island was a second island where the Croatoan lived. And I'm going to show you Croatoan right here in the title. They were living on an island right next door, very, very close to these people. So now and remember, the Native Americans hated the new European explorers because they were killing them. Thousands were killed with these vicious fights over food, land, natural resources, and also the diseases that were spread by the Europeans. So it wasn't like the Native Americans and the English really got along very well. The next section is called Worried Whispers. Within a few weeks of arriving, Robert began hearing his dad and other grown-ups whisper worriedly around a campfire at night. Settlers were in trouble. They hadn't brought nearly enough food or supplies, and with the few Algonquin allies in the area to trade with, they would barely be able to survive the winter. Remember, allies is basically friends. So with the very few friends that they had that were Native American, they just wouldn't be able to survive. Robert's dad and other settlers began to beg the colony's leader, John White, to return to England and bring back help. At first, White refused. His daughter, Eleanor Dare, was one of the colonists. Eleanor had just given birth to a baby girl, Virginia, the first English child born in America. How could he leave his family behind? Eventually, White gave in to the colonists' pleading, but first he made them a promise. If they moved anywhere else, they would carve the name of the place into a tree post so White could find them when he returned. And if they were in danger, they would add a carving of a cross. Then, with a heavy heart, White boarded the ship back to Europe. So we just learned a little something here that this man, John White, is the leader of this colony. Notice it doesn't say the president or the governor because those don't exist anymore. They're still under English rule. So he's just the leader who's helping the king or queen at the time to kind of head this settlement. All right, and we also know that he has a daughter who just gave birth to a baby, the very first person born in America that was from England. And he's decided, after all the colonists pleading, that he's going to go back and try and get England's help. But if they moved anywhere else, and this is very important, if they moved anywhere else, they would carve the name into a tree or post so he could find them again. And if they were in danger, they would add the carving of a cross. So they had two different things. The name would have to go up, and if they're in danger and they need help, the carving of a cross. Without a trace. In England, White faced one frustrating delay after another. By the time he found a ship to bring him back to Roanoke, 3 long years had passed. He imagined the settlers were waiting for him on an island, hungry and afraid. And that was if they were even still alive. At last, in August 1590, White arrived on Roanoke. He rushed toward the place where the colonists had built their cottages 3 years earlier. What he saw stopped him in his tracks. Where there was once a bustling village, there was now only an empty clearing. Almost every trace of the settlers was gone. Their tools, their tea kettle, their chests of clothes. Dust skittered across a bare path of earth. White almost sank to his knees in despair. And that's when he saw it. The word Croatoan carved into the simple wooden post. There was no cross to signal danger. Had the settlers simply moved south to the island where their friends, the Croatoan, lived? But as White and the crew sailed towards Croatoan to find out, a hurricane hit. Raging winds pushed the ship further and further out to sea. Getting to the island was impossible. John White would never learn what happened to his family and the other colonists. All right, so we're starting to figure out what the mystery of this place is. We're starting to figure out that these people left. They took everything. There was nothing left. And when we go back to that picture up at the top, take a look. We can see it. They left nothing. The houses are gone. Everything is missing, and we have the one post with Croatoan. Now we remember that the Croatoan were not only a people, but the name was also an island's name. It was the island right next to theirs that held the Croatoan people, the Native Americans that called themselves the Croatoan. So he knows that they're over there, but he just can't get to them because this horrible hurricane keeps pushing his boat further and further out to sea, and he just can't get to the island. Haunting clues. For the past 400 years, the disappearance of the colonists have puzzled people. Were they killed in the fights with the Algonquin? Did they try to sail back to England and get lost at sea? Or did they live happily ever after on Croatoan? Experts have found little to answer these questions, but there have been a few clues. Nearly 20 years after the settlers vanished, England started a new colony called Jamestown, just 100 miles north of Roanoke. From a group of Algonquin, these new colonists heard rumors about people nearby who wore English clothes and lived in the English lifestyle houses. Yet although Jamestown colonists searched for months, they never found these mysterious Englishmen. More recently, teams of archaeologists, those are people who look at things that they find kind of in the dirt, things from the past, have climbed through areas around Roanoke, including Croatoan. They dug up many items that belonged to the Algonquin: razor-sharp arrowheads, bits of pottery, fine copper jewelry. These finds have helped them learn more about the rich culture of Assamoah. The teams have also found a few items that may have belonged to the English people in the 1500s, but they haven't found enough to say for sure whether Roanoke settlers ended up there. So we have a couple clues, but we don't really know. It's still a mystery. So even now, archaeologists, the people who look at things from the past, who dig things up and find things that are still around from hundreds of years ago, can't seem to find any evidence or any belongings of the Roanoke settlers. They just can't find them anywhere, not even on Croatoan. Mystery solved. And perhaps that is the key to the mystery. Today, many experts believe that Roanoke colonists may have split up and been welcomed into different Algonquin tribes. We don't know exactly what happened, but we can imagine. Robert may have traded his itchy woolen pants and stiff leather shoes for a soft deerskin wrap and moccasins. The Algonquin may have showed him how to aim a bow and arrow, helped him become a skilled hunter. They may have patiently taught him how to speak their language. Robert and other colonists may have gone through these changes so quickly that there was almost no trace of their Englishness left, which might be why there are few clues for archaeologists to find today. In other words, the Roanoke colonists might not have gone missing at all. Like generations of newcomers who moved to America after them, they may have survived thanks to the help and generosity of the people who already lived there. We will never know for sure, but we do know what happened next. More and more Europeans arrived and laid claim to the land that was not theirs. By 1733, there were 13 English colonies lined up on America's east coast. About 50 years later, these 13 colonies would break away from England to become the United States. As this new country was forming, native peoples across America were forced from their homes and farms. Millions suffered starvation, disease, and violence. Within about 100 years of the Europeans' arrival, as many as 90% of native peoples in the Americas had died. Many Algonquin people of the East Coast were among them, but some survived to pass on their rich customs and traditions and stories. Today, the Algonquin are a major Native American group in North America. As for Robert and the Roanoke settlers, their fate will likely remain a mystery forever. So, we learned a little bit more here. They think that these people actually didn't go missing, that these settlers, like Robert and his father and the 115 other people who were dying, decided to team up with the Algonquin and take on all of their tradition, essentially leaving England behind and becoming kind of Native Americans themselves, learning to hunt and survive on the land rather than trying to be English in a new land. And we also know now that they never found them, but more English people did come, so it didn't stop the English. this disappearance never stopped the English from trying to get to the United States. In fact, they sent over the 13 colonies, which we learned about. They had slowly built up these colonies in America, which eventually became the United States. So they broke off. The 13 colonies existed, became the first 13 colonies in the United States, became the first 13 states, and then we eventually built up to 50 states. And we also knew this already. We knew that the Native Americans were forced away from their homes and farms and that they suffered, and eventually there were not many left. And we had actually watched the dances of the Native American tribe, the Algonquin and the Iroquois, in our school just a few weeks ago. And we know that they have these rich cultures, these rich customs, these really fantastic traditions, but there are not many people left to celebrate them. So we know that this was mostly because of the settling of this new land, which we now call the United States today. All right, so just to recap, we really do not know. We don't know what happened to the Roanoke colonists. We have no idea. We have no idea what happened to them. We can only guess that either they wound up living on that island and we just can't find any trace of them, or that they just became a part of the Native American culture and they split off on their own. But aside from that, we have no clues as to what happened to them. It is still a mystery today. So, your next task after reading all of this is to take a quick quiz. It should be super easy because we went through the entire thing together, all right? And if you need help with that quiz, you can watch the video from yesterday that we had done and the video from today. And we're going to do a couple more things with this story, all right, before moving on. And I will see you guys later.